Hello everyone, my name is Chin Valdez and today we're gonna be talking about team rotations featuring our main girl, Sanhua. So a general team composition would normally comprise of a support, a sub DPS, and your main DPS. So in our case, that's gonna be Verena as our support. We're using Yang Yang as our sub DPS, and Sanhua is gonna be my on-field main DPS. While there can be many variations in team compositions, such as having maybe 2 supports or 2 main DPSs, in general, normally you'd want a team comp with this kind of layout more or less. That's why we're hearing team comps such as Verena as your support, Yinlin who's coming in about 2 weeks as your sub DPS, and Calcharo as your main DPS. So these are the usual meta and optimal comps usually. So normally to find out if your unit is more optimal as a support or a sub DPS or main DPS, when you look at their kit, the support usually has a skill that will last for a long duration that will affect all characters in your team. So for Verena in particular, she buffs 15% all type damage for 30 seconds for all characters on your team. So this is a very powerful outro skill. Verena also has Gift of Nature in her inherent skill. She buffs attack for all your party members by 20% for another 20 seconds. So usually the supports have the long duration buffs for all your party members. That's why on Verena, we're also using the Rejuvenating Glow set, which increases all party members' attack by 15% for another 30-second duration. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Normally, you start off with your supports who have the long duration buffs and for the entire team. Now for your sub DPS, normally their buffs only last for a considerably shorter duration than your supports and will only buff the next character that you switch to. So for this team comp that we're using in particular, I use Yang Yang to battery our main DPS's energy, which is Sanhua, just to make sure that we have Sanhua's ult, even with less energy recharge, so Sanhua can focus more on crits and damage and all that. So with that in mind, most sub DPSs would be using this set, Moonlit Clouds, which kinda goes hand in hand with what we want from a sub DPS. We get another attack buff for the next Resonator that we swap into. And even for our Echo skill. So we get another buff for the next character that we swap into. So we're using Impermanence Heron. The next character that we swap into will have a 12% damage boost. Just as on our Verena, we're using the Bellborn Geoshalone, which buffs the whole team with a 50% damage reduction and 10% damage boost. So when it comes to team building, it kind of follows that layout where the support buffs the whole team, the sub DPS still does pretty considerable damage but is able to buff the next character, and the main DPS is the one that catches all of these buffs and is usually the one who has the most field time. But in our case, since we are using Sanhua as our main DPS, she's pretty much what you call a burst DPS. So she's still not going to be taking up too much field time to be able to dish out her maximum damage output. Now, you might have characters like Danjin or Calcharo who will be taking up more field time to be able to dish out their maximum damage. So normally for your main DPS, you'd be using a set that will boost their own personal damage. In my case, for our Sanhua, we're using Freezing Frost, which will boost our Glacial damage by a pretty considerable amount. Now, everything that we've just said would be applicable to every character in the game. May it be Baiji or Chixia, Danjin, Rover, Calcharo, Yuanwu, Mortify, basically every character in the game. But again, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's very important that you understand what your team's skill kit does. So to know these things, be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any new guides that will be uploading soon. Now, in our previous video, we did mention that Sanwa is more optimally used as a sub DPS because she does have this outro skill which buffs the next character's normal attack damage by a whopping 38%. And also, with the Resonance Chain Sequence 6, she buffs team members' attack by another 20%. So she is actually more optimally used as a sub DPS. But you know, this is a single player gacha game. It's pretty much non-competitive, so you can play the game however you want. And I would want to play my Sanwa as a main DPS. You can even play your Baiji or your Verena as your main DPS. This game doesn't exactly force you to play to the meta or to play optimally. So always remember to just play to have fun. For weapons and with everything that we've just said in mind, for main DPS, you focus on your character's personal damage. But for your support and your sub DPS, it normally depends on your character's kit. But for my Verena and my Yang Yang, we're focusing more on energy regen and using the Ceaseless Arya passive skill, which basically helps us get more concerto energy, which in turn helps us have a smoother rotation between characters as we use our intros and outro skills. But of course, this is a gacha game and we probably don't have the same equipment. You probably have better equipment than ours. And my RNG is definitely different from your RNG. So with everything that we've just learned, how do we put this into practical application? So with the team comp that I'm using right now, I usually start off with a Verena. I pop her echo skill, I pop her ult if it's available. I use her E. Do a charge attack to proc her buff, which is the Gift of Nature. It's an attack percent buff for all party members for 20 seconds to start things off. Then if you have Concerto Energy, you would be procking your outro skill when you swap into your sub DPS, which is Blossom, which buffs your whole team's damage by 15% for a whopping 30 seconds. For our sub DPS, I am using Yang Yang. So it kind of depends on what the situation is with my main DPS. So let's say I don't have Sanwa's ult up. And I have 0 energy on Sanwa's ult. Then I would need Yang Yang to battery Sanwa so that Sanwa's ult will be ready when it's her turn to take the field. So to do that, I have to make sure that Yang Yang has her Concerto energy. So to do that, normally I start off with her skill, which would give me a stack for her 4-day circuit, followed by a heavy attack and then a basic attack which will proc Zephyr's Song, which will also give me a stack of her passive. Depending on the situation, I probably do this twice to get 2 Zephyr Songs to make sure I have 3 melodies on her 4-day circuit, which will allow me to use Stormy Strike into Feather Release, which is more or less the majority of Yang Yang's overall kit. At this point, I probably have full Concerto energy already, and if not, I also pop her ult, which gives me more Concerto energy again. So with everything I've just said about Yang Yang, we're pretty much guaranteed to have full Concerto energy in time for our outro skill, which will battery the next character's resonance energy. Which finally brings us to our main DPS. So very often, we do swap into our main DPS from our sub DPS's outro skill, which means we're usually going to be switching into our main DPS with her intro skill. So Sanwa's intro skill, Freezing Thorns, is basically a plunge attack. A plunge attack downwards that creates an ice construct, Ice Thorn. So we did cover this in our previous video, so if you want to learn more in depth about Sanwa's kit, be sure to check that out. And immediately after that, I go into her heavy attack, followed by 2 basic attacks, which actually brings us straight to her basic attack 5. So this is actually the fastest way to get to her basic attack 5 without having to do her full normal attack string. So special thanks to Jonomate who pointed this out in our previous Sanwa combat guide video. So this is pretty much what it looks like. So the intro skill has the same attack animation as her plunge attack. So let's just pretend that this is her intro skill, followed into a normal charge attack and then 2 basic attacks, which will bring us straight to the final hit of her normal attack string. So this is actually a lot faster to be able to get to the final hit of her basic attack string, which will give us the Ice Burst damage boost if you already have her inherent skill Avalanche unlocked, and also her Resonance Chain Sequence 1 if you have that unlocked, which is another crit rate plus 15%. Now, depending on the depending on the combat situation, normally after the final hit of her attack string, you cancel that into a charge attack detonate. So it will look something like this. Doing this will shatter her Ice Thorn, which will deal additional damage once more. And again, depending on the situation, this is probably when I would use her Echo skill into her Resonance skill or maybe her Burst, then detonate. So that would be pretty much or more or less the entire rotation for the team. After which, I go back into Verena, rinse, repeat. But basically, that's the entire cycle already for this particular team comp that I'm using. So with that said, let's see how it looks like in actual combat. If you've enjoyed the content, consider liking and subscribing. I stream every day on Twitch, so if there's anything I've missed or you just want to say hi, leave it in the comment section down below or drop by twitch.tv/ChinValdez. Hope to see you all on the next one.